Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everyday Inspiring Women. It's episode number 26. I am so excited to have my friend Jennah Lear here. And so Jennah and I met, I think we met a little while ago, but kind of started to get to know each other a little bit better in the past few months. I'm going to let you do the introduction, but I'll just say Jennah is a branding expert, and the terminology you use when you're talking about branding really gets me. I remember the first time you were talking about women to really take a look at their branding, and you're like, you're building your empire, and I'm like, oh, I love that so much. Yeah. So I love it so much more when my guests introduce themselves and they get way more detail than I get into. So welcome, Jennah. Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to be here. So, I feel like it always sounds different every time I do an intro, but basically you hit the nail on the head. I'm a branding expert, but what I do is branding design. So my big thing is in my branding studio, I want to make sure that women understand that their brand is really a system to support their business. And it is the big picture. It's big picture work. So if you are building an empire, then you really need to take a look at how you're showing up, because your brand is your identity. So what I do in my studio, blueloui Studio, is as a designer and strategist, is I work with small business owners and entrepreneurs to really help them understand how to define their brand, design it beautiful so you can call in ideal clients, and really help you position yourself to stand out and sell more. That's what it's about. So it's pretty magical.
Agreed. I love that. Yeah. It makes me think, because I think a lot of my listeners are, because my audience is a lot of women who are on the verge of a business, or they're new to business, or they're like, God, I wish I was an entrepreneur. So how does branding fit into that niche of that, or that market where women are like, oh gosh, I'm so new, I don't think I need branding yet? Or how would branding really actually benefit me so early on? I think that's something like Nike needs branding, or, those sorts of things. But how does that apply to me as a brand new business owner?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I get it a lot. And a lot of times it comes from misconception of what branding is, right? So a lot of times someone in the newer space will think well, my brand's just my logo and I can go grab that somewhere or hack it, right?
Yes.
But I always like to say, if you're growing a business, you're growing a brand. And so it's really important to understand those two run parallel. And so, start in the beginning about the brand you want to build. Look at the brands that you admire. Oprah, or even in the entrepreneur space, Jenna Kutcher. I was just creeping on her website yesterday. And these people, they've built really great brands, but they did it because they had that vision in the beginning. And so allowing yourself to really think about what your brand embodies in the beginning is smart. And when you get to the design part, which is kind of where me and my studio come in, be smart about when you're doing it. Because if you're doing it in the beginning and you're making the investment in the beginning and you don't know who you're talking to or what you sell, and that's not solidified, then you're just going to end up rebranding. And that defeats the purpose of really building a strategic brand. It's meant to not rebrand every year. It's meant to grow with you and support you. So really just start to think about it in the beginning if you're so new and fresh to it.
Well, that's awesome advice. And I want to get into your story and stuff. I have one more question for you specifically about the branding. A lot of the characteristics of the women that I work with, we are either perfectionists or recovering perfectionists. I'm a recovering perfectionist, as an example. And as soon as you start talking about, this is what you're going to be doing, I start to get anxiety, because I'm like, what if it's not, what if I change it? Or what if I'm thinking about it? What if I'm not stuck on it? How do you help someone who is a perfectionist, and that they're that it paralyzes them to want to commit to a specific type of branding because they think they're going to change, in the future?
Yeah. So I feel like I've had some very graceful insight on this as of late. How do I want to say this? Okay, if you're a perfectionist but you're coachable, then that's one thing. If you're a perfectionist and you are, what's the word I'm looking for? Uncoachable, for lack of a better word, like you can't let go
You're
of the
stuck,
reins.
right?
You're gonna just DIY it, like just do it yourself, even if you're not a designer. Like you're not at a point where I or any other person can work with you on that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be coachable.
Right.
Because I get it, like it's an investment in time, energy. You have this vision in your head. How the hell are we going to bring it to life and make it beautiful and everything you've desired, right? But if you are in a space where you're recovering perfectionist or perfectionist, but you're coachable, then we can do this. You have to just, through my process specifically, I tell people, look, your job is to show up and tell me what you need, and my job is to create it, and we'll co-create. It's a co-creation process, and we'll do it together. So you need to trust me, and you need to, even when it gets tough and difficult, because it's not just a 48-hour process. It is a process. It's an energetic process too, is how I like to position it. Even when it gets difficult, just be honest. We'll communicate about it and understand that it's transformational. So at the end, you're kind of going to be like a little caterpillar blooming into a butterfly. It's cliche, but it's true.
No,
Like
I love it.
at the end, it'll be worth it, and you'll understand why we did the work we did, why I might have pushed you the way I pushed you, and why it feels so uncomfortable, right? Because you're stretching, you're growing, and it's a new level for you.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Perfect. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So
Yeah, of course.
how did you get here? So tell me a little bit more. I'm excited to get to know you a little bit better as well, but
Yeah.
what, actually, I don't like to put any context around it. So I'd love to hear more about your story.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess you could say I started out going the traditional route. I have a BA, so a Bachelor of Arts, concentration in design, marketing. Did that through university and then landed in corporate. And through a couple of different companies, I did like marketing, advertising. I was the go-to in-house kind of designer, if you will. But something just didn't sit right with the way my days were, the projects I was being handed, and I just, you know how you get that feeling where you're like, this is just, something's off, like I didn't know a lot about energy at that time, but intuitively I could feel the energy was the unbalanced and I was out of alignment. And that's not what the hell I worked my ass off for to get through college in 4 years and then go through this stretch of being in corporate, getting experience and learning. I was like, this is just not it. So I thought about going back to school for business, because I was always really interested in how, specifically how the design affects the business and creating from a more conceptual space. So I shot that down pretty quick because I still hadn't paid off the first set of loans. So I was like, how the hell am I going to do the second set? And as I was kind of going through this phase, I follow a couple different blogs. I was following Design Sponge, and there was an advertisement on there for something called Boss School. And it was this program, which doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. I'm grateful that I was able to be part of it when it did exist. But it was this program for women who wanted to be entrepreneurs. And it was like a 90-day hit the ground running fast track. And it was in collaboration with the Kauffman Foundation. So I was like, okay, I don't know what this is. I know it kind of pertains to like what I was thinking about. It's way cheaper, way quicker. I'm going to say yes to this and go down this road. And saying yes to that, this is a big part of my story too. I'll say the money was not there. I found it. Saying yes to that kind of like, it was an introduction into like a whole new life. It was like opening the door into a whole new life. I didn't foresee myself wanting to start an agency. I felt like I live in Cleveland and we have 1,000 of those. Like, we don't need another one. We don't need another freelancer. But going through this program and really hitting hard on the self-development in the beginning, it kind of tore back all these layers like an onion or something, right? And I really honed in on who I am and what my calling is and the kind of life I want and how I can show up to serve. And that's when I really was able to hone in on branding specifically for women and what that means for women as a collective and how there's power there. And I'm all about women finding their power so that they can just live their best life. And it's the snowball effect, right? So if I'm helping you, showing up and helping you to live your best life, to up level in business, you're going to take all of that energy and magic and you're going to do that for your customers and your clients. And I believe it really is this like snowball effect, and that's how we collectively change the world for the better.
Yeah. Oh, agreed. Like that now you're speaking my language. That's my jam for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Can I touch on you? I think you brought up an interesting point. I think this is a thing that a lot of women will struggle with. And I know that there's like so much information about women and money, but you said, the money wasn't there, but I found it. Can you tell me, like, knowing what you know now about like energy and probably manifestation and those sorts of things, tell me how did you find the money? Like if you're saying, you know what, it wasn't there, but I found it. Like, what was that shift for you? What was that like?
Well, I'm gonna think about how to answer this. So, let me just give you a little bit of a backstory. So Please. Long story short, I'll keep it short, is I've been on my own since I was really young. And it's kind of a weird dynamic because I do have a wealthy parent. So being on my own since I was very young and really having like a trial and error in life and everything else, and like pushing myself to get through school so quick, I have an innate sense of I'm going to figure it the fuck out. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to figure this out. So, when this program came about, I thought, okay, like, I'm not into asking, but I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask this person to help me because I know they're able to do it. And I know I can see long view that this is going to be chump change in about 3 to 5 years. It's going to be chump change, right? And so I had to humble myself and I had to ask, and I received gratefully, and I put that in, and then everything that I made from there, I put back in, and it's kind of like, it's grown from there. So, I guess in terms of like, does that answer your question in terms of like how I made it happen? It was like, yes. I guess it's like 90% attitude, 5% stubbornness, and then 5% being willing to receive, right?
Agreed. Yeah. And but I think it's a good point because it's like you're going, okay, I can't afford it. But it was that story you were telling yourself, or that stubbornness piece that was preventing you from seeing that there was an opportunity for you to get that, right, to receive the money. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was also thinking too, going, when what's the word I'm looking for now? But it's like when you want something badly enough, you're willing to do what's necessary to make it happen. And so,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I love that about that story because you're like, okay, I want this. And then it's like, you want it so bad. You're willing to do something that you wouldn't have thought you were ever willing to do that sounds bad, but I mean, in a good way, you're like, I want to do what it takes.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to stretch yourself. Like, I had no idea what the hell I was saying yes to, let's be honest, but there was something in me that was just like, Jennah, this is the next step. And it didn't lead to immediately quitting my job. I'll just add that.
Yeah.
But it was the catalyst. So yeah.
But I think that's an important point. And you and I were chatting before I hit record, and it was like, you didn't just wake up running your own business. Like, it was these compounding steps over time of having that eventual goal of, yes, I want to run my own business, but what steps you took along the way to get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we have a misconception, like people just wake up and they're like, oh, I run a successful business. And, you know, what sacrifice
Yeah.
did it take for you to get that? It didn't just happen overnight.
Yeah. I think it's funny because so my business is branding. Like I brand for other people. It's a weird paradigm, right? Like I brand for other people and it's a branding business, right? So the point I'm trying to make with that paradox is sometimes I think, well, I can contribute to that, right? Like I don't necessarily contribute to false stories because of who I specifically work with my ideal client, but branding contributes to that, right? So you probably see the beautiful, shiny stuff, right? But behind the scenes, we're all in just like a bun, looking like a hot mess with a cup of coffee on our couch, you know? Like, so yeah.
Okay, I want to talk about that. So I sent you a list of questions. I've only asked one so far, but
No, it's okay.
but I think that's fascinating because isn't our behind the scenes stuff or our challenges or, you know, like you said, a hot mess, isn't that part of our brand to a certain extent too? Like
Mm-hmm.
the way we present it or part of our, you know, I said, I like love story. Like that's part of our
Yeah.
story, which is part of our brand to an extent,
Mm-hmm.
right?
It is, and it's a really good question that you're asking. It's also very interesting because it depends what kind of brand you're building, right?
Yeah.
So you're probably not going to see Nike's probably not going to expose their cube farm where people have like wrappers on their desk and shit and they're like looking like a mess, right? Like Nike would never do that because of the brand that they're building.
Right.
And that's not what they're highlighting. They highlight athletes. So if you're building a very raw, authentic, purpose-driven brand, depending on what it is too, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a coach, that's going to look a lot different than someone who's selling like bath products. You know what I mean? So yes is the short answer. It contributes to your story, but you're probably going to have people that are following you in your journey versus interested in like the service or the product. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Great. It's a great point too, because yeah, you're right. It
Yeah.
depends which
Yeah.
brand is and depends what your ultimate goal is that you're working
Yeah.
towards. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. And it's probably a good thing too, because like I said, you're having people following you versus your service or your product. And that's a loyal following, right? They want to know your story and your journey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how a lot of self-branded people have really built their empire, you know?
Right. I love that word. Yes. That's so good.
Yeah.
So now you are on your own. Like now you own and run your own business. When did you leave your corporate job? How was that transition?
Well, it's kind of interesting because I made the leap from corporate to freelance
Okay.
like 2 years ago. So the way that it's went is I'd had blueloui for about 3 years, and I started the business journey for about 4. And I've had corporate jobs through then. I launched blueloui in 2015, and I left my job subsequently at the same time. Not intentionally, it just kind of worked out that way. And but you know, I'm not one of those like 6-figure 24-hour wonders, you know, so I had to have money coming in. I had to have cash flow. The bills still have to be paid at the end of the day. So I went back into freelancing. And so what I would do is I would go into companies for anywhere from like 2 weeks to 6 months for a contract, and they would retain me as their in-house designer for that short amount of time. And I did that for 2 years. And the last one, so this is the first time I've shared this story. So we'll talk about stories. So the last one was ended. I had freelanced with the same company for about over a year and a half. And they were looking to add someone full time. Of course, you kind of put in the work and kind of build a rapport with the team. And it was a really great job. I loved it. First one I actually really liked. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go after this. I'll build on the side. It's okay. People have done it. You know, putting yourself in a happy space is what's important. So I went out for it and I didn't get it. They chose someone else. I know, right? Like you freelance for a company for 2 years and they chose someone else. And I think there's an inevitable period of mourning, right?
Yes.
There just is. But I also believe that everything happens for a reason. And so I went back to my mastermind group and I said, okay, this happened. I've let myself mourn about it. I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm done. I know how I want to show up in my business. I know that my business is needed. I know my mission and how I'm changing other businesses. It's time. And so I made that mindset shift recently, actually. It was in July. And things have been flowing ever since. You have to commit and make the mindset shift, and then things will open. The doors will open. So, yeah.
Awesome. Oh, good for you. So how are you feeling about that now? Like you're looking at it to say, yeah, that was a good thing that had happened because it changed the trajectory of your career.
Oh yeah. It had to happen in order for me to be like, okay, blueloui is where my business is. It's where my job is. It's where my time and energy is. And so it's kind of like when these things happen that's absolutely feel like they suck, it's for a reason, right?
It's like they had to let you go to do it. They had to almost
they
give
had
you that permission.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Or else I would have been like, I would have kept hanging on because I actually liked the job. And, so it's all good though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that. Like, not in a sadistic way, but I think that's incredible when things like that just happen. And then you look at it and you're like, I'm so thankful for that bump because it's really put you in the path that you're meant to be in, truly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, like, money's a real thing, and my goal is to talk about it more because I feel like it's a taboo and we don't talk about it as women in business. And in order to have more of it or just have a healthy relationship with it and not give yourself these like crippling money stories, we just have to talk about it. So I do want to say that, like, where was I going with that? I do want to say that, the work that I've done up until now has really been like learning how to make my own money, right? Like learning, like, when the chips are down, how will you find the money to make rent, or how will you, provide and not rely on a job or not rely on a second source and just on yourself. And I think that's the biggest journey for entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
And so now that I'm full time, I have that confidence in myself to where, when the chips are down, it's more along the lines of manifestation and trust and inspired and intentional action versus just crying, and like being
eating
upset.
ice cream.
Eating ice cream, yeah, which is totally okay too. But it's trusting yourself is my point. I think I was trying to get to. Yeah.
I think that's interesting. Well, I think I would love to talk to you about money then. So we'll save that for a one-on-one conversation, but okay. I couldn't agree anymore. I think that, when we talk about relationships, we have to talk about them. We have to work on them. We have to be positive, or at least try to work and be positive about them. And then we wonder, why do we have such an effed up relationship with money when we don't talk about it, and we're like, we're shame about it, and and we're just all over the map about it. Like, I love money, I hate money. It's, there's so much to be said about it. And I think one of my favorite things was someone was like, literally is a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And we put so much story
stock in a piece of paper. Yeah. One of my favorite things that I've ever heard about money is it's just energy.
Yeah, me too. Yes.
Like when you get in that mode where you hold on to it and you like won't let it go because you're afraid you won't ever like have any more or something. Like, it's energy. Like, you have to, like, it has to move to flow, right? It'll flow in, it'll flow out. It's just a part of it. So that's how I tend to look at it now.
Me too. Totally.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Because it's like, and I'll talk to my clients and I'll be like, because women want to give everything for free and we don't want to get paid for stuff for some reason. And And so that's the first thing I talk with my clients. I'm like, you have to have an energy exchange so it's even. And it's both ways. It's not just you giving energy out and not receiving it. But I think that goes back to the whole learning to receive things, and then that whole, which we could spend another hour talking about too.
We could, yeah, it's a thing. Yeah.
So now that you're up and running, and you are like building your empire, and and it's busy, and I feel like if you're anything like me, like, because I love my business, I feel like you are very passionate about yours as well. Like I could work on my business all of the time, like easily, because I love it so much. Like, not healthy. So how do you fit self-care into that? Like when you love doing your business and you're trying to grow it, and then you're like, oh my God, did I eat today? Or I only ate something that was maybe not good, or other healthcare stuff. What do you do to stay tapped into your healthcare regimen or routine?
Remembering to eat's a real thing. Like it's a real thing. Like it's crazy how fast the hours go by. But I would say, and yes, I am, like, to your comment or question, you never turn it off in your brain, right? Like it's sometimes you have to literally turn it off because it's just too much. So I'd say, and I know we were talking about this before, but the way my schedule is, I'm finding right now the biggest self-care I can give myself when I have time is sleep. So giving myself the permission to like shut it down and take a nap, or, shut it down for the night early and go to sleep early. That's probably the biggest one, because that's the most natural energy we can get, right? And we need that. So that's the biggest one. And I think it's like intuitively learning to listen to your body, which is a lot of the work I did in the beginning of my business with self-care, is learning what your body needs. It will tell you. So when you're getting to the point where you have a headache, then it's time to close the computer. Like if you are feeling like you haven't had anything to drink, and then you realize you haven't eaten, go eat. It sounds so simple and basic and minimal, but when you're going and you're just in flow, these things happen. So I think it's the basic stuff. Just sleeping, listening to my body and telling myself it's okay to shut the computer and shut it down. I like to treat myself to massages and pedicures when I can. So those are probably your more typical self-care answers. But yeah.
I get on a soapbox when we talk about self-care, because it's like, I'll read an article and be like, this is self-care and this isn't self-care. And I'm like, wait a second. Like I get to choose what does self-care look like for me? So back to your point when you're talking, going intuitively, getting quiet, even for a couple seconds, taking a couple breaths and going, what do I need? And then letting your body answer. And then I need, and I love that thank you for bringing up sleep. I think, we get caught in this sacrifice of sleep as a status symbol, or like, I only get 6 hours of sleep. And I'm like, but that's not good. Like, I don't know that that's something to be proud of necessarily.
Right. Yeah. I think I've actually gained weight from not sleeping, to be honest with you. It's like a legitimate thing. So when I started noticing that, I'm like, okay, sleep is not a sacrifice anymore. It's a hard boundary. So yeah.
Totally. Yes. Good. That makes me want to take a nap today, but I got plenty of sleep last night, so we're good.
That's good.
The not negotiable somehow, but anyway, yes. Okay. What else was I going to ask you? So do you feel like, so you're good though, you're not dealing with guilt because you've been doing all of the self-work and saying, self-care is a necessity. It's not a guilty feeling. It's not something I need to feel bad about. I should shoulding to be working on your business instead, those sorts of things.
Yeah. I still deal with guilt it's interesting because, and I think you can easily relate to this, like when you have a full-time job, you're building your business. Building a business takes time, right? And if you work 40 hours a week, you have to literally make time. And so I naturally, my point in saying that is I have a natural personality towards guilt, like guilting myself. I'm hard on myself. I'm getting better at that, not being so hard on myself, but that's a natural part of me. And I can look back and see that when I was like 5 and how I would handle situations, you know? And so when I was in corporate and building my business, I would have a lot of guilt around time, right? And so now that I've kind of transitioned and I am in my business full time, I think there's less guilt, but this just happened the other day. I took a pool day and I ended up, what did I do afterwards? I think I ended up going to the movies afterwards. There's like a whole day shot, right? And I know. And this has come after a very busy August, very magical, 18-hour days, right? 6-7 days a week. It's a real thing. And I was feeling guilty all day Sunday. Like, can you believe that shit? I was feeling so guilty. I was like, I should have worked so I could keep up with the timelines. But now that things are kind of dying down in a sense of really just becoming more of a normal timeline,
Yeah.
And deadlines and everything, it's like I have to let that go. Like, that's ridiculous to not gift myself that time, right? I think at the end of the day, it is still time, but it's like if you have a natural tendency to guilt yourself, that's something you're going to probably always work on your whole life. I know I'll always have to work on that my whole life. Yeah. Our business are our babies though, right? So it's like it is like maternal. So it's like there's guilt there from a maternal piece, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel that. And it's like, and you know, sometimes were you feeling guilty that day on your beach day or the day after? Just curious.
It was a little bit of the pool day and then hardcore the day after. Hardcore, but yeah, it's I will say I've gotten really good about the techniques about how to let it go. So usually when I feel like that, I let myself feel like that for, a small amount of period of time. And then I tell myself, okay, you can do 2 things. One, you can drop down and ground your energy, right? Or you can go write it out and then burn it. So sometimes I'll write out what my guilt is, just get it out of my body and out of my mind, and then just burn it to let it go. Like it physically doesn't exist anymore. So, yeah.
I gotta start doing that. I love that idea. I need a bowl to burn shit in.
Yeah, it's an excuse to burn shit, but it's good.
And who am I kidding? I need like a huge fire pit, not just a little bowl. It's gonna be a big bowl. I just burn a bunch of stuff in there.
Yeah. Totally get it. Okay.
That's awesome. I love that you give yourself permission to feel it too, because it's like, that back and forth and going, okay, like feel it and then do something about it. But, we want to just skip over those feelings. And I don't think that's productive either, because then because they're just going to keep coming up unless we at least acknowledge them. At least
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this is kind of a side note, but it's coming up for me. So I want to share.
Please.
I don't lead with this, but I kind of identify myself as an empath. So I've always been very sensitive. My mood can switch like that, but I've realized, not bipolar, but I've realized that like growing up, it was because I was in these situations and I could feel other people's energy and I didn't understand how to separate my own from theirs. And so when I started my business, doing all that really beautiful self-development work, I realized this about myself. And I realized how precious your energy is. And if you're an empath or you tend to pick up on other people's energies, how precious it is to notice that and separate it, right? And so I think when it comes to letting yourself feel things, like you have to let yourself feel the things, but you also have to notice if you're picking up feelings from other people around you. And if you are, separate yourself so that you can figure your own shit out first. And then, putting those boundaries around it for yourself and for others. So I guess in terms of feeling things, that's really, that's like a really big piece of my business, I guess is what I want to say, because I always got the, you're too much, right? Like you're too much, you're too sensitive, you're too this, you're too that. And so I went into my business thinking from a masculine energy, thinking, well, I'm just going to go about this and just, it's going to be this way and I'm going to do it this way. And who cares how I feel? Who cares about how I'm attached to it? Who cares? But because of what I do with design and how I intuitively feel into my clients, one and their vision, once I decided to embrace my sensitivity and my emotions and my feelings, my work got better. Okay. My design work got stronger. My process, I was able to figure out my process better with my clients. And now it's like when it comes to feelings, totally a part of my business. I don't shun them. I don't write them off. And people who don't use their feelings in business need to take a hard look at that. And I get it. Like I come from corporate, so it was always like, check your feelings at the door. You're here to work, right? So yeah, that's a big part of it. Sorry, random tangent, but
hardly a tangent. I think it's completely applicable to our conversation because,
yeah.
And I would even circle it all the way back to when you're talking about branding and you want your clients to show, like showing up and understanding who they are. Because when they're coming, going like, this is who I am, and you having knowing yourself that way, like, yeah, that's magic is just going to like explode out of that because in order for, I feel, it's my opinion maybe, but in order for you to help your clients understand who they are, like having that true sense of self is going to help them, help find that in them. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And that's feelings, right? Like you have to feel it and let yourself feel it, which sounds so elementary, but it's actually really hard for us. Would I go out on a limb and say it's hard for Americans? Maybe like we just don't let ourselves do it. So, you know,
but I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that's the patriarchy that we live in. It is not feeling, it is doing, and all that big long list. And my experience in corporate is very hammered into keeping my emotions in check.
Yeah.
And I would say there was years where it was like I was so numb, and it was like, but when you don't feel and when you're numb, you're in the middle. So yeah, you don't feel the bad things, but you don't feel the good things the way you do once you start giving yourself permission to feel the feels, as it were.
Absolutely. I love saying that. Feel the feels. It's so true. So yeah.
Oh, this is so good. Like I just like to sit and like enjoy the conversation because it's like I have so many questions, but I'm like, I'll take a moment, just enjoy our conversation so far. Thank you. So now you're like, okay, my August was like crazy busy, like in a good way. And then like now you're kind of like slowing down back to normal.
Right. Yes.
So I think of like, I notice for myself in my experience, like themes will pop up in my life when it's like, I probably quote Brene Brown every single time I talk, but it's like, she'll say it's like whack-a-mole. And it's like, oh, there it comes, and like hit it down and be like, okay, I'll deal with that later or whatever. And then it just keeps popping up here and there. And then you're like, okay, this is a theme that's keeps kind of resurfacing. So I'm curious if you notice themes that resurface or what am I trying to say? Like what themes are coming up for you over the next little while?
Yeah. It's actually very beautiful things that are popping up right now. I'm going to dream big, which I'm excited about, right? You're doing that too. Woo! And it actually falls right in line with what's popping up for me is like dream bigger. So blueloui is at 3 years. We're celebrating our 3rd year at the end of September. I'm so excited.
So, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's giving yourself the permission to like stop and realize what everything you've done up to now, right? And so that you can continue to build. And what I'm finding is I've actually done a lot of the goals or dreams on my list in terms of like the business, right? So now it's setting bigger goals and letting myself dream bigger and really what does the empire look like? So scaling, we just added an assistant. I'm excited about that. Yes, it's exciting. And then, yeah. And then I think a big part of what I'm excited to learn at this conference I'm going to is really dialing back to like what our message is, honing in on that, making sure that it's supportive for that next phase in business. We're not in startup mode or just building from the ground up anymore. We're in scaling mode. We're in, okay, now we know what works. We know what our clients need. How can we perfect it? How can we add to it or subtract from it? And really solidify it so that we can go forward with just clarity on what we offer and how our clients can benefit. So I guess scaling mode, to keep it short and simple, but all the beautiful things that come with that. So it's exciting.
I love that. And I think you said something where I'm at is like giving yourself permission to play bigger and dream bigger.
Yes.
Like every single time, I think I noticed that you had just recently been like, oh, I'm interested in a vision board workshop. And I've done like 2 in my lifetime, but both times I have to sit back and go, I have to give myself permission to be like, to really want what I want.
Yes. Yeah. It's slowing down and giving yourself the time, like, and the space and the energy, because it's so easy. As you know, it's so easy to like, just, I'll deal with it later. Like you were saying, like, I'll deal with it later. So, I was interested in that vision board workshop because even though I have like 2 in my office, I feel like every year, especially at a 3rd year mark where you're looking to scale, it's time to like think bigger. And what does that look like? So, vision boards are actually one of the questions, or one of the answers to the questions you gave me, and tapping into what I want. I think that's a very, very powerful tool. And side note, the job that I freelanced for 2 years, it was on my vision board. So I literally manifested it.
Yeah. It's amazing awesome. I love hearing those stories when people be like, oh, this was my vision board. And then they look back on it a couple years later. And then they're like, that actually all manifested for me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So exciting.
Mine's this one I just recently did is fresh and new. So, and the feedback even I got from the woman who was just this wonderful woman who was facilitating the workshop. She's like, did you really even dream bigger? Isn't there more left in you? And I'm like, probably.
Yeah. Pushing yourself. So what's not comfortable and achievable, but actually like the big kahuna, right?
Right.
Like, yeah, I love that.
Yeah. But I guess that's part of which, she's intuitive as well. So she's like, I know you well enough now to know that there's way more. There's more left.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
You talked a little bit. So you talked about the first work. I forget what you call it, the boss.
School. Yeah.
School. Yes. Thank you. And you had a mastermind group in there, and I met you through an incredible mutual friend, Valerie Cap, and she's incredibly talented as well. And I know that you're in a mastermind with her. So it kind of leads me to my questions around community. So I'm very open, like community is huge. There's like women coming together to support and like uplift each other, like what is part of your mission for blueloui. But how do you continue to create community? So being busy and self-care, but how do you fill that piece of, I would say, fill up your cup as far as surrounding yourself with a supportive group of women that you can lean on for good times and in bad, like to celebrate and during challenges. How do you do
that? Absolutely. Yeah. I actually have we all have to, it's so funny saying this, but I feel like in community, you have to learn how to lead and follow, right? In order to connect and build and keep up relationships. Like, it's relationships. And sometimes relationships are really hard, even if they're not like your family, because of time and energy, right? So I've I'm an introvert, and I've always kept my circle small. So it's really, really pivotal for me to have that mastermind and that accountability of just a couple of people, so we can really lean into each other, like you said, in good and bad times. So I actually have to put a lot of effort into, because how I think I naturally am, I have to put a lot of effort into my larger community. And so I try really hard to reach out to people that I haven't talked to in a while, and go to local events that are relevant to women in business, and try to just stay in touch with people. I think it's so I always say a woman on a mission is unstoppable, right? But women on a mission, like, it's limitless. And so it is a lot of work to maintain relationships, especially if you're an introvert and someone who actually, I may not seem it, but in new situations, I am quiet. And so yeah, community is super, super important, but you might have to work a little bit harder at it. And I do, and that's okay. But I think you have better relationships that come out of it. So yeah.
Agreed. And I think that's a really good point, talking to both the introvert and the extrovert, and again, going back to that self-awareness piece, going, yes, I'm an introvert, but I also know how important and powerful, and even though it's going to be a little bit more work for me because it's not my go-to, I know that the work I'm going to put in is hugely valuable for my growth in my business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just connecting. I think that's the biggest thing, is just connecting, and then trying to lead with, well, how can I support you? Or what resources can I send your way? Or do you want to grab a cup of coffee? I think that when I made the mindset shift about my business, and that being number one, I also made the mindset shift about that too, trying to be a connection or a resource or support for women in business. And it's contributed, right? It's connected me to beautiful people like yourself. And it's connected me to a lot of different people, because someone always knows someone. And yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think, and supporting each other. Yeah, I think that's really good.
Awesome. Yeah, even if it's just cheering somebody on and like hearing them. So there was something that we did in the mastermind I was in before, and I absolutely loved it. It was like, when someone said something, even if you didn't relate to it or couldn't support it or connect them, you always say, witnessed. I see you, I hear you, it's witnessed. So I think that's powerful too.
Yeah, definitely. Because I definitely feel lots of women want to feel heard.
Yes.
And sometimes just just holding the space. That's it. Sometimes that's all they really need.
Yeah, absolutely. So
awesome. I listen to Audible. I don't know if you know that. I talk about Audible all the time because I commute for my corporate job, and so I like to listen to audiobooks, and then I'm like, oh, thank God, it frees up some time so I don't have to read.
Yeah. No, I'm on Audible too.
Okay, perfect. I'm obsessed with, I love books. Mostly I love self-help books, but curious, do you have a favorite book that is a go-to book for you, or like a motivational quote of sorts that you're like, that you lean into a lot, that you find helps support you when you need it? Like, you go to it when you need that little extra something.
Well, I don't tend to reread books, but I will say a couple that I've read or listened to are Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. Being a creative, it was really, really great to kind of hear how she positions that for creatives and how to create, and with everything that comes with it. So that was really great. And then You Are a Badass, and then You Are a Badass at Making Money with Jen Scalia, right? Is that her last name?
Sincero,
sorry. Yes.
Yeah, no, love her.
Jen
Yes.
Sincero. She, I love her. I love the way that she, even just like her talking on the book, she did it justice. So it was really powerful, and I actually might reread those. And then I'd say, okay, first of all, I'm like an affirmation and quote junkie. So there's never just one. But one that I really like is Say Yes and Figure It Out Later. And that's by Tina Fey, who is my spirit animal. So I always love that quote.
It's a good one. It reminds me of, I think Danielle Laporte says like everything is figure outable unless it's Marie Forleo. One of those two is like everything is figure outable. Yes.
I love that. I use that a lot too because it is. So, yeah.
Awesome. This is so fun. Thank you so much, Jennah. I really appreciate it. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, get more information about you or Blue Louie, I'll put the, I'll type it out in the notes as well, but how would they get in touch?
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's a couple ways. One is you can just email me. It's helloblueloui@gmail.com. But then, of course, the two other ways, you can go to our website, bluelouistudio.com, and you're probably going to want to look in the show notes because everyone always asks me to repeat that and how to spell it. So check that out. And then I mostly spend my time on Facebook and Instagram, which is under Blue Louie Studio. So yeah, find me on there, PM me.
Perfect. Awesome. I will put all of that information in the notes, and then if you want information to connect with Jennah a little bit further. Again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. I loved getting to know you better, and it's such a good chat. Thank you so much.
Of course. Super inflow. I appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity.
My pleasure. Awesome. Bye.
Bye.